What's going on, Audioholics? Tyler here from Audioholics Anonymous, and today I bring to you a video where I will review every single Mike Flanagan movie, as well as the two shows that he's released at the very end. And I'm doing this because Mike Flanagan is one of my favorite modern directors, certainly one of my favorite horror directors. I'd say my number one favorite has to go to probably Robert Eggers, but he's only got two movies. We're not going to be reviewing his filmography anytime soon. Mike Flanagan, on the other hand, has a more extensive filmography, and he's definitely second place. I absolutely love his films, I love his shows, and I can't wait for Midnight Mass, which is coming out later this month. I'll probably do a review of that when it comes out. But for now, let's start off with Absentia, which was released in 2011. And this movie follows some sisters who have been estranged for a while because of the disappearance of one of their husbands and drug addictions and things like that. And they move it back in together, and weird shit starts happening, and they start to believe that there's another dimension where this husband was taken. And this dimension and the creature that lives within are mostly kept to the shadows in this movie. It's a very Lovecraftian movie in feel. Sort of like this thing is bigger than us. There's nothing we can do about it, and just the sheer knowledge that it exists is enough to drive you insane. I think for a first movie, this is absolutely phenomenal, and it holds up a lot to this day. I think the focus on characterization, and story in this movie really became a Flanagan staple as his movies would go on, but it's really well done in this movie, and it just helps to add to the stakes. I really enjoyed this one. I would give it a 4 out of 5. Moving on, we have 2013's Oculus. Just straight up a modern classic. I might say that once or twice more on this list, but this is just easily a masterpiece of psychological horror. The whole story with the mirror is just haunting, and this remains one of the most intense movies I've ever seen. The atmosphere of this thing really quite reminds me of The Shining, and also the ending is really well done. I love how hopeless it is. Just amazing. And again, very Lovecraftian, with the main character kind of being seen as insane and going insane at the end of the movie, and it's just really, really well done. So I give this a 5 out of 5. Moving on, we have 2016's Hush. And this is a neat little home invasion movie with a twist. The homeowner is deaf. And this makes for some really interesting scenes. I particularly love the scene where the killer just makes it abundantly clear he's not walking away. She's like, "I haven't seen your face. I won't tell anyone. I don't know anything." And he just takes his mask off like, "Bitch, I don't care. I'm here to kill you. I'm gonna fucking kill you." I love how he just toys with her too. He's like, "I can come in whenever I want, but I'm not going to. Not until you want to be dead. Then I'll come in and I'll kill you." However, I think he bit off a bit more than he can chew with this fucking bitch, because she will fight, man. She is one of the most fierce protagonists in home invasion movies that I've seen. It really reminds me of Your Next, actually, which is, again, a movie that's kind of home invasion, and the victim sort of turns the tables on the invaders. I really quite enjoy these types of movies that kind of flip the trope on its head, and I think this one is pretty well done. Also, it has one of the more happy Flanagan endings. I quite like it, but I would say it's probably not of the same quality as Oculus, so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. So next we have 2016's Ouija Origin of Evil, which is a prequel, I believe, to like a pretty bad film that I don't really remember much of. I watched it like back when it came out, but it wasn't very good. So it's cool that they made a sequel prequel type thing, but they had somebody who's actually like really good direct and write it, and it shows. It really does. This is actually a very creepy movie, and mostly due to Doris. That little girl's performance as Doris is just haunting. I mean, holy hell, Doris and her fucking creepy ass agape mouth, like, ugh, that shit really stuck with me long after the movie was over. I'm like glancing up at walls and shit because I'm expecting some creepy ass little girl to be hanging off the fucking ceiling. Man, this movie is just, it really got under my skin with the way she would move and act in the background. Like the scene where What's-His-Face is like reaching into the wall and Doris is in the background just being creepy as fuck. I was like, yeah, this movie definitely succeeds in being creepy. Also, I really like the slow build up with the father, who is actually Elliot from E.T., like the actor. That's pretty fun, I think. I don't know if he's been in a whole lot of stuff since E.T., so it's cool that he's done a few collaborations with Mike Flanagan, and we'll mention him again a little later. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's the best Flanagan film. It's actually probably my least favorite, but it was well worth watching, and I would recommend it to anyone who enjoys these sort of creepy ghost movies. I give it a 3 out of 5. So next we have Gerald's Game, which came out in 2017, and this is my personal favorite Flanagan film. The premise is that the main character, played by Carla Gugino, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing that right, who is an amazing actress, is handcuffed for some sexy time with her husband. Unfortunately, the husband has a heart attack and dies right on top of her. So she's stuck handcuffed to the bed with no way to the key. Yeah, this is a survival horror movie, and it succeeds in being one of the most well-written horror movies. I mean, fuck, one of the most well-written movies I've ever seen, as well as just one of the creepiest and most horrifying. Like, imagine that concept of being stuck in the bed like that. I mean, honestly, just the shoulder pain from that alone would be enough to kill me. But Jessie, which is the main character, she shows such strength. I really like the fighters in these Flanagan films, and she definitely fights to survive. And she's one of the most deep characters in a horror movie that I've seen when we learn about her past and her father and her relationship with her husband, which, by the way, I really love how they did that in this movie. You know, basically you just have her on the bed, so they gotta, like, have plot and conflict and all that too. And the way they do that is they bring out these other actors, like the husband or even her herself, and they have conversations. And that's meant to, like, communicate her internal thoughts and feelings on what's going on to the audience in a sort of artistic way. I really enjoy that. And this movie has such striking visuals as well. It's just one of the most aesthetically pleasing Flanagan films. And they're all really well shot, and they all have really striking imagery, but this one especially does. And if you're thinking, well, it's a survival movie, how can it be creepy? Alright, well, first of all, the dog, which is basically like Cujo Light. Damn, I remember being scarred by Cujo as a kid, but this dog was, like, pretty scary even to me. And then you have the fucking old guy who comes in every now and then and just stares at her in the corner or something. That is creepy as fuck, dude. This movie definitely succeeds in just being really well written, but also a really good survival movie and also a really good horror movie. It's a fucking masterpiece, and I would give it a 5 out of 5. So next we have 2018's Before I Wake. And this is certainly the most unique movie he's made, in my opinion. It's a kid whose nightmares become reality. And that gives way to some pretty surreal imagery, which is really, really nice. I said that Gerald's Game has a lot of striking imagery. This movie as well has a lot of striking imagery and just amazing shots and awesome compositions. I really like that concept, but I'll say I wouldn't really consider it a horror movie. It's certainly horror adjacent. There are creepy elements to this movie, like the fucking guy who sometimes walks around. He's fucking creepy as hell, but, like, the movie as a whole, I would say, is more about the characters. Much like Pan's Labyrinth, for instance. It's great, and it's creepy when it needs to be, but it doesn't really need to, rely on that sort of horror to carry the movie. The characters do that well enough, and you truly do care about them all by the end. So I would give the movie a 4.5 out of 5. Next, we have 2019's Doctor Sleep, and this is a divisive movie for sure. It's a sequel to one of the best movies ever made, a Kubrick movie of all things. How could this possibly live up to those expectations? Well, if you expected a Kubrick movie, it's not that, but it certainly does pay homage to his style. No, this movie is very much its own thing, and I think that was always the best way to approach it for Flanagan. I mean, think about it. This movie had to simultaneously be a good movie, a sequel to The Shining, a faithful adaptation of the book, and make both Kubrick fans and Stephen King and his fans happy. That is just so much fucking pressure, okay? That is a lot of goddamn pressure. That's a lot of expectations being put on Flanagan for this project. But I would say he succeeded in spades. No, it's not as good as The Shining, but it was never going to be as good as The Shining, okay? That's a Kubrick movie, and it's a classic, and it's been around for decades. This movie was never going to live up to that level of quality, of expectations, but it's amazing for what it is, all right? I would say the movie isn't really creepy, but it is disturbing at times for sure. The child torture scene especially is brutal and really got to me. I was shocked that they would do that because, like, child deaths alone are pretty rare in horror movies, but full-on child torture scenes where the villains fully admit they're trying to cause as much pain and fear as possible, and just hearing the agonized screaming of that little kid, traumatizing. I'm telling you, it was so disturbing. Rebecca Ferguson plays Rose the Hat in this movie, and I low-key have a bit of a crush on her. And so it's awesome to see her here. Her performance is great, and Ewan McGregor also does a great job as grown-up Danny Torrance. Also, Elliot is in this movie. He portrays Jack Torrance, both in a brief flashback as well as the bartender at the end of the movie, which is not stated to be Jack Torrance. He calls himself Lloyd, but almost certainly it is the spirit of Jack Torrance, and he plays that. So it's kind of cool to say Elliot from E.T. reprised the role of Jack Torrance. Well, not reprised, but took the role. You know what I mean. So yeah, those were all of the Mike Flanagan films. And if you'd like to click off at this point, that's fine, but I'm going to quickly give my thoughts on the shows that he's put out, because I didn't really feel like I could do this video without talking about them to some extent. So first, I'm going to talk about 2018's The Haunting of Hill House, and I absolutely adored this show. I think it took a lot of the things that were really good about Oculus with the flashback storytelling and things like that, and it made them more fleshed out and just a lot better because it had a lot of a longer runtime. This is an absolutely amazing show, but I will say it does suffer from some pacing issues, and it can take a while to get going, right? Like, the first few episodes are really kind of a slow, sludgy pace, so it can take a little bit to get really invested in this story, and because of the flashbacks and flash forwards and present times and everything that's going on there, it can be a bit hard to follow at times. I know it certainly was for me the first time through. I was trying my best to pay attention, but even I got lost, and I had to, like, rewind an episode or two and, like, rewatch it again. And I'm like, oh, okay. So it can be a bit hard to follow. For that reason, I'm going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. Next, we have The Haunting of Bly Manor, which was released in 2020, and this is phenomenal. It's such a great show. The characters are so well written and deep, and I love the story with the kids and the nanny, essentially. I love all of the romance elements. The ending, the fucking ending, the last episode is one of the most sad fucking things I've ever seen. Very few movies or video games or music can bring me to tears, and this one almost fucking succeeded in that because it was so depressing and sad, but also bittersweet and happy at the same time. Also, I think it was episode 5, which focused on, I forget her name, the, caretaker woman. That was such a good episode. That was one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen. This show isn't just purely a horror, and I think that it's scary, but sort of in an existential way. Like, if you really think about the themes and, like, what the characters go through in this movie, it can be really horrifying in that sort of Lovecraftian existential sort of way, rather than an in-your-face scary kind of way, which is how The Haunting of Hill House was. For that reason, I would say this is a masterpiece. 5 out of 5 is what I would give it. I absolutely adore it, and I can't wait for Midnight Mass. I have very high expectations for it, and I have no doubt in my mind that Flanagan will live up to them. So what do you guys think about all of these Flanagan movies and TV shows? Are you looking forward to Midnight Mass? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below, but without further ado, I bid you adieu. Bye, guys!